All right, sir, everybody's in. If you want to go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for being a part of this. I truly appreciate you taking time out of your Wednesday night evening to be a part of a conversation that I think is pretty important to have, especially these days. So I just want to say, obviously, how much I appreciate you being a part of it. So thank you very much. Thank you. And I'll get into who's here, but I just kind of want to obviously just say a few comments at first. Obviously that this is a very important and I believe critical conversation to be had when it comes to Asian hate crimes, Asian discrimination, and of course, unfortunately, violence against Asians. Clearly, this is something that is absolutely so shocking, yet as we're seeing, so prevalent and so prevalent at so many levels, from Atlanta to Colorado to New York City, literally all across our country, and even here, unfortunately, as I'm sure we'll hear from you, on the Central Coast. And what's disturbing is that even in a place like the Central Coast that really values our immigrants and obviously the contributions of generations of Asian Americans, to know that something like Asian hate crimes can still happen here. And I have to admit, I'm a little incredulous thinking back to 3 weeks ago when I stood in front of the Chinatown Bridge there in downtown Santa Cruz with George and Gail Al, admiring the beautiful archway that highlights the former Chinatown in Santa Cruz, and obviously highlighted the many contributions of Asian Americans to not just Santa Cruz, but to the Central Coast. And being from a family of immigrants, as I like to say I am, thanks to my Italian-American grandparents, it made me proud knowing that I am from a place and represent a place that truly values all immigrants. Yet, when we turn on the TV and what we've been experiencing lately, the alarming rates of hate crimes throughout this country, and when we see January 6th and what happened in our nation's capital, and we see the rise of hate groups throughout our country, you just sort of are dumbfounded and ask yourself, how is this happening in such a great country? And how do we explain these types and this type of violence to our children? And how is it, as stated by the FBI director, that ethnic and racially motivated domestic violent extremists are now the highest threat domestically to our homeland security? How is that? And you really can't understand it. And so you try to look at, is it the social media, the internet? Is it the cable news networks? Is it political leaders who use divisiveness? Is it these shared conspiracies? And I don't know. I don't know. But I do know that it is our diversity that is, has been, and will continue to be our nation's greatest strength. And that's why at the congressional level in Washington, D.C., we've done everything we can to condemn this type of violence and obviously highlight our diversity. There's HRES 151 by Grace Meng, a colleague of mine from New York, that condemns all forms of anti-Asian sentiments related to COVID-19. There will be a resolution forthcoming by Judy Chu, the Congresswoman from Southern California, that mourns the victims of the shootings of Georgia and condemns the violence against the Asian American community. And then there is the legislation called the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act that's going to enhance federal, state, and local responses to hate crimes related to COVID-19. And as we saw last month, the judiciary hearing had a full hearing on to address the rise of anti-Asian attacks. And I can tell you we're just getting started. We're just getting started so that we can have answers to those questions that I asked earlier, but also provide solutions. Ideally, I think what we'd like to see is a vaccine, and a vaccine for hate is what it comes down to. But in the meantime, that's why I'd like to have this conversation tonight with many of you who have contributed so much to our community here on the Central Coast, and really stand for how proud we are as a nation, as a community of immigrants, of Asian immigrants. And so what I'd like to do before we get into our conversation is just recognize the people who are here tonight and allow you to say a few minutes of comments if you would like. If not, you can just say hello and where you're from, but also feel free to provide your own comments for just a couple minutes. We got a short amount of time and a lot of people on the call, and we got some questions to answer about how you're feeling about what's going on now. So the first person I'd like to recognize is who I previously mentioned, and that's George Au of Santa Cruz, although grew up in Monterey there on Cannery Row. So George, and Gail as well is with you. You're on mute.
Out there, right there.
There you go.
Son of a gun, that's George.
Jimmy, can you hear me now?
Got you great. Thanks, George.
Jimmy, thank you so much for having this. And I see some familiar faces from my boyhood here, since I'm Bayview School and Walter Colton Junior High and Monterey High class of '60. So glad to see my new Monterey and old Monterey friends too. But this is an amazing thing. I want to hear from my friends and people I don't know if they've had any problems. I haven't seen anything in Santa Cruz. I haven't had anything personally or read about anything or heard about anything. So I just want to say that for the moment and pass it on.
Great. Thanks, George. Thanks, Gail. Council member Kathy Bayala from Marina City Council, please. Thank you for joining us. She not on?
I think she's having trouble. She keeps dropping it and joining. So there she is.
Thanks, Aaron. Richard Zhang, Monterey Peninsula Chinese American Association.
Richard, you're muted.
Thanks, Larry.
I'm sorry. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Richard Zhang. I'm the president of the Monterey Bay Chinese Association, but I do work in DLI full-time. Our association is very young. It's about seven years, and trying to promote Chinese culture in the Monterey Bay area. About this evening's topic, personally, I haven't ran into problems with anything, but I did have one incident in San Francisco on the street. Yeah, a man trying to attack me, and my wife and I were walking, and we just escaped. You know, I couldn't fight him. Okay, that was like 2 years ago. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Good to know you all.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. I think Council Member Bayala is back on. Is that correct? Yeah, there she is. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, thank you very much, Congressman. So I am the City Council member, newly elected from November, and I'm the Mayor Pro Tem as well. I have to say a little anecdote here that we were very concerned about what had been going on for several months as a community. And so at the very day when the Asian women were killed, we were reading a proclamation from our city. And during that time, I had no clue that this had happened. So it was very timely. But I think that we experience in Marina, we're basically close to 70% people of color. And we are extremely diverse. And yet I will say that we don't have the overt violence. However, we have systemic racism. We have the undercurrents of racism every single day, from people's placing Black Lives Matter signs and or flags and being defaced or taken down, to wearing a t-shirt and people say ugly things to you, to even running my campaign for an elected position, also getting some pushback on racial kinds of comments. And so I think it's unfortunately here, though not at the overt levels, but it's definitely something we all have to address.
Great. Well, thank you for being a part of this tonight, council member, and congratulations. And we're glad to have you there in that position. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ellie Hattori. Hi, Ellie.
Hi, Jimmy. Thank you so much for having this gathering today. I have to tell you, I was just so gratified to hear that we will have this opportunity to get together and share some of our experiences, not necessarily just personal, but friends, and share our feelings about this situation that we're currently facing today. I believe that it has been there for a long time. Unfortunately, recently, we've had some reasons to have it surface. This is my husband, Rick, and I'm happy he could join us as well tonight. We've been residents of Monterey I've been here for 50 years. Rick was basically raised here. He was born in internment camp. But I'm really, really looking forward to tonight. And I think we have an awesome group of people here to share our thoughts and suggestions with. So thank you again for having us.
Thanks, Ellie. Thanks, Rick. And thanks for all you do with the Oban Festival as well. Thank you. Jeff Uchida from the Japanese American Citizens League.
Good evening, Congressman Panetta. Thank you so much for hosting this really important dialogue. It's great to see the people here. A lot of wealth of knowledge here, and it has been very disheartening to see the hatred that's been going on recently, especially for the older folks. That's man. If that was my grandparents, that I don't know how I'd react, but to see just being victims just because they look a certain way is just terrible. But I think we need to talk about it. The more that we can discuss things, you get to educate people. I'm also a Monterey Peninsula Unified School District trustee, and so I hope to get that kind of stuff out. And Mr. Panetta, I'd like to invite you someday to one of our schools to see what's going on. So thank you very much, everybody.
You let me know. I'd be happy to via Zoom and hopefully when back in person too.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Larry Oda from Japanese American Citizens League of Monterey. There you go.
I tell everyone else to unmute, but I forgot to do it myself. Thank you, Congressman Panetta. I'm sorry. I'm a past national president of the Japanese American Citizens League, also chair emeritus of the National Japanese American Memorial Foundation in Washington, D.C. So, I have a lot of contacts through my associations and that JACL is the nation's oldest and largest Asian American civil rights organization. So we keep tabs on these kinds of things. And, back in 2015, we were patting ourselves on the back saying, hey, we've done a good job in stemming the tide of racism. And then the election of Donald Trump happened. And it was kind of a wake-up call, that we've been patting ourselves on the back. We haven't been doing the kind of job that we need to do. When you look at the results of the election, the whole middle part of the country was red. The coastal areas, I have my own ideas of why it happens, but he had his, maybe he still does have his supporters in those areas. And, a lot of the reasons for that we can discuss, but it was we were kidding ourselves, I think. Racism has been around in this country since maybe before the Pilgrims came. With slavery, with the subjugation of the Native Americans and Filipinos, Chinese, Japanese, and I mentioned the Indians. So it's something that's been around so long and so ingrained in our American culture, I guess, that we kind of, I don't know, disregard it. Maybe not disregard it, but it's there, and we live with it. In order to change this, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take generations to educate people, to change their views on how to treat others. So, George mentioned, was from New Monterey. I'm from New Monterey, down by the canneries. Jeff is, Rick is, Doug is. So you have a lot of folks from the old part of Monterey. So, but thank you very much for doing this, and I hope we can share our ideas and find a direction to move. But thank you.
Great, thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. Greg Nakanishi. Hey, Greg, good to see you.
Good to see you again too. Can you hear me now?
Got you good. You're good.
Okay, good. Hey, the reason I don't have any esteemed positions that I hold in the national JCL or the local JCL, but I am pleased to be a part of this call. And I think we can all agree that systemic racism exists in the country and has been, for generations. I mean, I remember during, Ellie mentioned that Rick was born in the detention camps. I know your dad was instrumental in the redress, passage, and he helped our family personally so much. And here we are still dealing with these same issues. And for that, I'm saddened. I think it's gotten better, but it's, racism still exists. What concerns me today is the rise in violence. And it's not just against Asians. We kind of, it's like the weasel that pops up at the fair. We hit the weasel on the head about violence against Asians. But gosh, what about violence against police officers and violence against Black Lives Matter and just violence against everybody, mass shootings? That's what really concerns me, is that our country seems to be going down this path where, each level of violence increases every time. And so now it's not one person being killed, it's 4 people being killed, or 6 people, or 30 people. And we don't seem to get our arms around that. And why is that okay in our society? So I'm looking forward to this discussion, not only here, but really learning from our congressional leaders about how we address this as a country and as a society.
Understood. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate the comments. Thank you. Douglas Suchia.
Oh, hi. Am I muted? Can you
Nope.
hear me?
That's good.
Okay, thank you. Congressman Panetta, thank you very much. Again, I want to join in those who have thanked you for setting up this this meeting, this roundtable. I think I recognize a whole lot of people, but I'm going to just say hi to George. I haven't seen you for a long time, and you lived on Prescott Street, and I used to come to your house and lift weights and look at your big muscles. So anyway, the thing that strikes me the most is right now in the House of Representatives, I think there are at least 1 or 2 resolutions and maybe some pending legislation. And it's just cut right down the middle in terms of those who are in favor or in support and those who are in opposition. And I think with respect to one of the resolutions, there were like 160 Republicans who voted against it, just took a stand against it, maybe 17 Republicans who did. But what's so frustrating is it's just not those kinds of resolutions or legislation. It seems like it's become really more apparent that it's Democrats versus Republicans, and that seems to have gotten worse. And I think that we can look at Donald Trump. I think Congressman Panetta, you mentioned political leaders, and certainly Donald Trump has ripped the scab off of racism. We've always had racism. I remember meeting with a bunch of graduate students from Jackson State in Mississippi, and this was a while ago. And something they said to me kind of struck me, because I thought in the North, we're pretty even-handed. We observe civil rights and all of that. And he said, no. He said, all over the United States, he says it's like that. They treat us blacks the same way in other parts of the country as they do in the South. And America does have a history of racism, and it's been there and it still exists. Thank you again for setting this up, Congressman.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate those comments. Professor Alice Yang from University of California at Santa Cruz.
Hi, thank you, Congressman Panetta, for holding this important forum. The one thing that I'll add is that if you're not already aware of the website Stop AAPI Hate, it's at stopaapihate.org, and it's a website that documents the number of reported incidents ranging from verbal harassment to violence. And it, unfortunately has documented, and I want to emphasize, this is only a fraction of the number of cases, because these are the cases that people report, that almost 3,800 incidents have happened just within the last year. And one thing that I want to highlight is that among these incidents, women are targeted at a rate of 2 times more than male victims. And unfortunately, as a faculty member at UC Santa Cruz, I'm hearing reports from students that reflect that there is, largely verbal harassment or people shunning people, giving them dirty looks, crossing the street, making them feel very unwelcome, but that women report much more hateful and sexualized, hateful comments. And that's something that I think we all need to grapple with, that it's horrible when you have these famous incidents of elderly people being, becoming victims of physical violence, but there's widespread, there are widespread incidents that don't reach that threshold and yet definitely are harming our community. And, as a historian, there is a long history of anti-Asian racism, going back as far as the 1840s, right, when Chinese immigrants first started coming. And that we've seen this continuously, only now what has happened is it's usually framed in terms of either a concern about national security or a concern about health, right? So there's a kind of veil to try to, separate it from the more virulent lynchings and burnings that we saw earlier. But, we really need to recognize that this history of scapegoating has to be contested. And I would argue, partly because I'm an educator, that education needs to happen, right? Students need to learn about this long history of scapegoating people of color, Asian Americans specifically, right? And how at different times, people will look for a scapegoat and they will look at someone with a different skin color. And sadly, especially with the rhetoric of the last administration, that has now targeted people of Asian ancestry as well. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Professor. David Kong from Greenfield Union School Board. See you, Dave.
Hi, Congressman Panetta. Nice to see you tonight. Thank you for holding this discussion. It's very important for the Asian community to speak out and denounce all this hate that's going on. I'm, as a school board member, I'm really concerned about our students that are in Monterey County that are of Asian, background, and I'm afraid that with all this violence going on, that they're going to be attacked on, and so I'm just hoping that our schools are up to the task in terms of, and our police departments are up to the task to protect their citizens when these things happen. I saw George All on there earlier, and I don't know if he's still on there. My family, his family goes way back. My dad actually in the 60s worked for his dad. If those people knew Monterey, remember the old Avenue Market down there. So yeah, and so that market was doing a lot of serving the needs of the community in New Monterey for food and everything for the folks. And then my dad moved to Salinas a few years later and served the El Sal community for many years, providing their food needs, especially the ones that are that need help and all that. So yeah, so the Asian community, many Asians own businesses, continue to own businesses. And I know down in Greenfield and Soledad, a number of, if you walk into the small grocery stores, guess what? Asians own them. They're supporting the community. I just hope that there's no violence toward them. And so that's where I'm at this point. I'm hoping that with more people speaking out and more help from the Congress, our legislators and folks, that we can maybe turn this thing around. Number one is to get people educated, and so we are not the problem. We're not the problem of we didn't cause the virus, right? We didn't carry the virus. We don't spread the virus and all this. Don't blame us as scapegoats, and let's all work together, to make America better.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that. Ted Asaki, pastor at El Estero Presbyterian Church.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I think I speak for all of us. We appreciate not only yourself, but your father as well, who's been very supportive of the Japanese Asian American community here. So we're truly grateful. When I think about it, overcoming racism, to me, it takes more than protests. It takes more than legislation. I think the problem goes much deeper than that. And so I think the task is trying to discover what is the root cause of racism? What's the root cause of hatred? And coming from the position of being a pastor of a church, I think it's a spiritual problem. I think the problems that we face is because, as the Bible says, we're sinners, we fall short of God's glory, and we need God's help. We need the faith-based community to come together and to address the issue. To me, I think it's an attitude of the heart that needs to change. And I think that is where my position as a pastor could help as I address my congregation. I think, Ellie Hattori is a member of my congregation. She often hears me speak about the importance of loving God and loving others. And so to me, it's a faith-based issue. It's coming to recognizing that there's a power greater than ourselves that can help us overcome hate. It's the power of God's love, which we just celebrated a couple days ago as we remembered not only the death of Jesus, but the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. So, I think it's a spiritual problem. And I think to address a spiritual problem, we need the faith-based community to really speak on the importance of love. Love for all people. Scripture says that one day there'll be people from every land, every nation, every tribe, and every tongue. God's love extends beyond ethnicities. In fact, the Great Commission says, go therefore and make disciples of all. And the Greek word is ethnos, all ethnicities. So, and I'd just like to say hi to George. You don't know me, but I went to school with your sister, Jeannie. And my brothers hung out with your brothers, Terry and Dickie. So it's good to see you. Please say hi to Jeannie for me. She would be surprised to know that I'm a pastor.
Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate that. We're not surprised you're a pastor based on that very articulate statement in regards to how you're feeling about it being a spiritual problem. So thank you very much for that. Dr. Chris Hasegawa.
Hi, Congressman Panetta. If you're going to visit Jeff's students in the Monterey district, you need to come out and visit ours in the Spreckles Unified School Union School District. I'm on that board. You know, a little more than a year ago, I was walking around the fields here in Spreckles, just kind of ironically along Tanamur and Antle's property. And this white pickup went by and these two young guys leaned out and said, "Hey, Chink, take your virus back and go back where you came from." I wanted to let them know that I was a Jap, not a Chink. But the big thing that caught my attention was, why are these people empowered to do this kind of stuff? Why are they feeling like that's okay to do? Because it didn't seem like that was, I mean, I was shocked to have that happen to me in Monterey County, especially where I was. For the last, I don't know, decade, I've been going to middle schools and high schools and talking about my parents' experience in the internment camps. And when I used to do those talks, people, the kids would say to me, "You know, I can't believe that our country would let that happen. I can't believe those kinds of things are happening." And now what I hear from kids, especially Latino, Chicano kids, are resignation. This kind of thing happens to them. This is part of their experience. And when are they coming for them? You know, their experience isn't shock that that kind of racism exists. It's recognition and resignation that that exists. And of course, they're sorry to hear about what happened to the Japanese Americans during that time, but it doesn't surprise them in the way that it used to surprise kids. And then the last story that I want to tell is, I'm on the board for a retirement facility for Japanese Americans in the Central Valley. And they had a memorial plaque in front written in Japanese. And some Yahoo went through and defaced it with spray paint, threatening them. And the people that are in that retirement home, well, if you're 92, you were like a freshman in high school during the camps. And so these are people that are in their 90s and some in their late 80s. So they're people that actually, when you talk to them about it, they didn't think that camp was, I mean, they had friends and they didn't have to do chores. It wasn't so bad. But they remember their parents crying, and they remember watching their fathers lose their sense of purpose because they didn't have something to do. They remember the terrors of their family when the government came and took them out. And they remember all those feelings, and all of those are churning up for them again now during this time. And it's just heartbreaking. So there's a high cost to what's going on, and it's part of that systemic racism that's been part of our lives for a long time. These senior citizens I've been talking to said, you know, it was really hard for us because it's hard to say that we're being discriminated against when you see what happens to the Blacks and the Mexicans in our country. We didn't have it as bad as them, but we certainly were discriminated against, and that's just churning for them right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Wendell Nuss and his wife, Catherine Nuss.
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity, Congressman Panetta, to be a part of this. Obviously, I am not Asian American, but my wife, Kathy, is, and I've been associated with the Japanese American community here in the peninsula for 35 years or so. And so it's nice to see some of the familiar faces. And, I think this is a useful discussion to have in terms of, obviously I don't experience the same things that, many of you on the call do, or potentially do. So my experience, obviously as a white American, I've have some privilege, and but it's really incumbent upon us to also learn and to help bring others up to a level so that, we can stop the violence and and the hatred and the oppression of, Asian communities as well as, Black communities and American Indian communities and so forth. But yeah, so I think this is a great opportunity, to do that. And I'm at the Naval Postgraduate School, and and I know there's discussions there in terms of trying to increase diversity and being aware of that. And so I think these are conversations that can be carried, beyond just this. So I'll let Kathy say something.
So I just wanted to share that I am on a Japanese American Facebook page. And there was a woman who was talking about how she went to visit her hometown, small town, and how she was walking around and some white-haired lady just started to yell at her about going back to your own country and you don't belong here. And then at the end, she ended it with, I grew up in Pacific Grove, California. And I was shocked to see that. And it was just like, it floored me that happened here. But it shook her up so much that she didn't even have a response because she just never expected that to happen. And so, so it is happening here. And I just wanted to share that.
So Congressman Panetta is having a couple of technology issues, so he just fell off very quickly. So hopefully he'll be joining back in just a second, but I want to introduce Mr. Roy Recio from the Tabera Project in Watsonville.
Southville right there.
Roy, you're muted, sir.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. So my name is Roy Recio. I'm a third generation Filipino American, grew up and was raised in Watsonville, of course, in the Beach Road labor camp. I'm a descendant of the 1930 anti-Filipino race riots and have a project. It's a, labor of love, the Tabera Project, honoring Fermin Tabera, who was a martyr of the 1930 Watsonville race riots. And I'm just trying to, promote Filipino American heritage on the Central Coast, tell our stories of the Manong generation and the struggles, sacrifices, and contributions of the Filipino Americans on the Central Coast who really don't get their just due. So thusly, we have an exhibit, we have a website, and we're hoping to do an oral history project with Dr. Yang real soon. And we just want to make sure that our voices are heard, part of the fabric of American society. As you know, we're really trying to push for ethnic studies as well. I know that Governor Newsom had signed some documentation for the CSU as well for local high schools to have ethnic studies presented and part of the mainstream curriculums. That's one of our thrusts of the Tabera Project, is to tell our stories and also have our stories be, validated in the educational institutions. So that's one of our projects once again. So I have a group, and our concerns are really, raising our voice, being heard, and every time we hear someone being injured or vandalized or violence imposed upon them, it hurts us. We see it, we hear it, we feel it, and as well as I do, it hurts your heart, to see an elder being beat up on a subway, to being someone, being spit on, or the gal at the Deer Dawn station in San Jose being harassed and pulled by her hair because she's, going to work. She's a nurse going to Stanford. We feel that, we hear that. And then once again, we're trying to do something about that. But as the Congressman said, what can you do to prevent someone from being racist? That's the bottom line. That's the crux of why we're here. And so we're trying to address these days. But once again, as folks here on the chat know this all too well, we've had this discussion previously all too often.
Thank you, Roy. Appreciate that. And I think the last person to introduce himself is Mars Rockamora. Mars, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Congressman. My name is Mars Rockamora Jr. I'm the president of the Filipino community of Salinas Valley. and I'm also a third-generation Filipino. I also sit on the board of the Asian Cultural Experience here in Salinas, preserving the culture, the culture of the Chinatown area. I'm also on the Salinas Downtown Community Board working with the homeless people out there. Hatred has always been there, and talking with a lot of people, it's just been amplified more this past 4 years. And me growing up in Salinas, I'm born and raised here in Salinas. Yeah, I'm Filipino, but a lot of people considered me Chinese, because they didn't know Filipinos back then. They didn't know what Filipinos were. So they used to call me Chink or, all that. So growing up, I've went through that. Okay, but I guess it just, I just didn't really think nothing of it because just growing up like that. But now with the past administration, presidential administration there, you're starting to see the violence. And talking with a lot of people, now you're seeing it's the left against the right. And I've had a lot of discussions with people that, I don't engage with people because of the fact that you'll never win. And I've seen too many families being split apart, too many friendships being broken just because of this. And a lot of it is, I feel that they feel entitled with the last president. Now that people are picking on other people. It's not only the Asian community, the Black community, the Hispanic community, it's also the LGBTQ community. They're seeing it also with this past administration. But, what I see, the only thing we could do is talk more about it, but not engage with people who you can't change their minds. They're just going to be causing more and more problems, and that's where the hatred comes. But it's just trying to have bring it to the table and trying to have a decent conversation with people. But I think that's what we need to do.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mars. I appreciate that. Well, I'd like to, in the limited time we have, I'd like to kind of put out a couple of questions there based on a couple of themes that I heard from all of your insightful introductions. And I know George Au is waving his hand, and George got a lot of shout outs, so I'm going to let him say, what's up, George?
Did you miss Linda Kadani?
Oh, I don't think, I didn't see, is she here?
I see her and her husband.
Oh yeah, then of course, definitely. I'm sorry, I didn't have her as part of it, and I don't see her on. Yeah, Linda, please.
Hey, Linda, speak up.
Yeah, Linda and Alan, Connie, there you are. Thank you. I apologize. I didn't. No one let me know you're here. Sorry, Linda and Alan, please.
That's okay. I thought we were going to be able to skip that. I'm Linda Kadani. I'm a second-generation Monterey. George was my neighbor down the other end of the block, as he was my next door neighbor to my aunt, Kate Tanaka. I am a former educator, and I am co-president of the Monterey Buddhist Temple. As far as anything going on, I look at education as being one of the biggest parts and awareness in education as to ethnicity. Too many students don't know where they came from. They don't know their own nationalities or where their families even came from. And with that awareness, I think it becomes important for them to know what their family struggled with. And I don't think a lot of people know what they struggled with, even with the Japanese Americans. When I was 16, at the JCL National Convention for Young Students, they didn't know that there was a detention camp. I was one of the few who was giving a lecture on it at that age, telling them this is where your parents went. They really don't know that. I know that there are organizations such as Daisho, which are recording the Japanese American families who were in detention camps and presenting programs in Seattle. But I think it's a lot of awareness that we need to do. Not just within the schools, but around communities. The DLI has been one of the sources of that by presenting with their students, but we need to do a little more, even just with the Obon or the Chinese festival in Salinas. Those are the kinds of things that I would like to see around. Have I experienced it? I've heard it. I was at Costco, and unfortunately, a Hispanic lady was saying Chino, Chino, and she was running away from me. And her husband was very frustrated with her. And I could get the gist of what they were saying in Spanish, but I think hers was just misinformation. But that's the part we have to all do for all races, is the misinformation and the scarcity of it. I mean, I know I separated my students one time in class, and to different races, and to whether they were blonde and blue-eyed, and the students looked at me and they thought, what are you doing? And I said, this is history right here. This was Germany, this was Japan, this was this, and they didn't know. And they really don't know. And that's, I think the biggest part is awareness with other people.
Oh, my name is Alan Amemia. I'm a retired dentist in Seaside. A lot of my patients were chair heads, head of department, or Asian language instructors at Cal State Monterey Bay, DLI, International Studies School. They were all part of mine. I was born and raised in Sacramento, but I've been here since '78. But in Sacramento, my mother was involved with the redress start with an attorney named Henry Takeda in Sacramento. And also she was executive secretary for Bob Matsui, and we knew Doris Matsui also. So we've been involved with that. I'll keep it short, but the hatred of Asians and the difficulties I've heard from a lot of my patients through the years. So it's something that has always been concerning, and it's something that I know we all have to work at. But thank you, Congressman Panetta, for involving us with this also.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you, Linda and Alan. I appreciate that. And thanks, George, for highlighting you. I apologize for not including you early on. Like I said, I think just in the limited time we have, I know there were a couple of themes that I heard in listening to all of you who provided a great historical context beyond just the Prescott Street reunion that I guess we're having here too. I think, obviously it was the root causes of hate. What are those? Why are people empowered right now to feel this hate, and worse, to act on this hate? And then what is the education, and how can we learn? So I guess kind of taking those three themes, I'd be happy to open it up to anybody. And basically you can either wave your hand, or you can go to the reaction button and press on the raise your hand button as well. And I'd be happy to call on you. And I see Councilmember Biala being familiar with Zoom, as I'm sure she's conducted a lot of her business over the past couple weeks, months, has been doing that. So Kathy, please, you got your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, and in respect for everyone's time too, I'll be brief as well. But it seems really tragic that no matter how participatory Asians are in American society, no matter how successful we've been, no matter how decent of people that we are still subject and targeted for hate. And that's just a realization that's just hard to comprehend. And I think looking at all that's happened, there are two things that I've come to understand now. I've done a lot of reading and listening to the news, et cetera. And there's two major things: that we can no longer be silent bystanders. And I think we're learning that from the George Floyd trials. But for myself, I know that I have seen microaggressions, but I have not necessarily got out in front of it and contributed to supporting somebody who was the target of that. And so for me going forward, I say, no, none of us, whether we're standing next to a Black person that experiences some kind of cruel words, that we should be there to support them. We cannot expect others to do that for us unless we're expected to do that for everyone else. And the other thing that I realized recently is that that the people of color can't do this by ourselves. I mean, we, as everybody has said here, this has gone on for decades and centuries. And so we know that if we're going to change something this go around, it has to be different. And I think that the place where it can be different is that we don't stand alone, and that actually white folks with a lot of privilege and power and authority, they're very important in changing systemic racism. And so I think that that we can no longer say that is an okay thing to be quiet, or to only say things when it's not risky for us. I think this is the time that not just the people of color, but the white majority folks can change systemic racism. And that's a whole nother discussion, but it was kind of a revelation that we cannot do it this time. We have to do it together and in big droves of white supporters.
Thank you. Thank you, Council Member. Richard.
Hi. As you mentioned, one is education. I think that's very important. That's we can do. I'm a teacher, and also in class, and whenever we have the chance, we discuss about this, how to treat people. And this is America. This is what I came to America for, 25 years ago. So it's not that everything has been changed, but just in recent years, things have been changed. I started to doubt myself, but on the other hand, I don't doubt myself. So I still believe in the system. Second is that I think we as Asians or any minorities, we need to express our voices, and through different channels. Monterey Chinese Association, I do have 3 groups. We use WeChat. One is 65, one is 100, and the other group is 200. We do have groups. I just reported at least in our groups, nobody has been attacked, because we use this WeChat groups to let people know how to protect ourselves and how to express ourselves. That's very important, and it is very instant. We just, something happened in Fremont, okay. It's very fast and instant. So we all tell each other, okay, if you go out 2 or 3 in a group, don't go out alone. So all these measures are good, and I'm so happy to say that none of our members has been in a bad situation. And thirdly, I'm thinking, we're talking about this level. It's like education, we changed people, like Pastor Ted said, is love people. Yes, that's good. I'm for that. But how about the Congress, the representatives at the top, state level and federal level, what are the things they are going to do? I mean, legislature, I don't know. Something has to be said, or things has to be said by, I say, important, powerful people to fight against this. The voice has to be strong rather than the before, last 4 years, and it's just the other way around. So I am thinking that something with the top legislature or Congress or the senator or whatever has to be done. Something has to be done to crash down at least this kind of mood or movement or whatever you call it. To actually, this is just a phenomenon to Asian hate. There are more, as everybody told. There is more. There is the hate itself. Okay, so we are just at the how do you say that? One of the phenomenon. Okay, it's just we put on the top. Okay, here is Asians that will be, but there is much more systemic, and we're a long way to fight. We're a long way to go. So I think I really hope they're on the top level, Congress or that level, do something about it. So that's all I can say. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Richard, I agree with you. And I think that the new president, President Biden, agrees with you. And that's why on March 19th of this year, he signed an executive order condemning and combating racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against Asian Americans and Pacific and Islanders.
Yes, thank you.
I think the congressman is frozen again, but I see George, Mr. Al, you have your hand up. You'd like to go next. George, you are muted, sir.
How's the?
There you go.
You're muted again.
I think you keep pushing it twice. Just push once. There you go.
Okay, thank you. You hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, great. What can we do? We are amongst the best Americans. We try so hard. We reach success. And we've been around a long time. And we still get beat up. And we still get all these sorts of things. It's so frustrating. But I'm thinking, and I think that Donald Trump was a big reason for that. He just made it okay to kill Black people, to beat up Asians, and be racist. And now, thank God, we have President Biden, Vice President Harris. We have Jimmy getting us all together. And you know what? It warms my heart to see my boyhood friends, people I've known. If I'm 78, I've known you guys for 70 years, a lot of you here. And it really warms my heart to see you. And of course, it makes me sad that we're talking about this. But you know what? We got our people in. Let's support Jimmy. Everybody say thank you to Jimmy. You've already said that, but let's keep supporting him in what he does, because Jimmy's trying to help us. And the way that I see it is, we're maybe 5% of the population throughout the country. We're a small part. And so even if we fight back all the hardest that we can, we need the Jimmys, the Kamalas, the Joes. We need them, and we need to support them. And they're like our big brothers that are that we're going to support to make powerful, to fight with us. I think we do have to speak out, like Kathy said. If somebody is getting harassed or something like that, we have to speak out. And I thought about this. Now, I don't think I'm going to get harassed in Santa Cruz because I feel so comfortable here, but I might. And I'm not telling anybody else what to do, but I want to speak up if I see somebody else harassed. And if somebody starts beating on me, I'm going to beat him back. And if he kills me, then I'll fight to the death. That's what that 76-year-old woman said that bloodied the guy with a stick fighting him off in San Francisco. I said, you know what? That lady is my hero. And I think it's so cowardly. A big, young 39-year-old guy going after like a 5-foot, 76-year-old woman. And I'm thinking to myself, this is crazy. I hope they send him away for 50 years. And we have to do whatever we can. And seeing all you guys here, it gives me hope. Jimmy and his staff, it gives me hope. I'm done. Thank you.
You're never done, and that's what we love about you. Thanks, George. I appreciate that, and sorry for my internet connection. As I was saying, there are leaders at the federal level, not just with Joe Biden, like you said, Kamala Harris, and obviously our senators, Dianne Feinstein and Alex Padilla. as well as the Hawaii senator and so many Congress members that I'm so fortunate and honored to work with as well, that are really leading on this issue and leaning into this issue, which you're right, it's very refreshing considering the past 4 years. But fortunately, that's the turn that this country has made thanks to the participation by all of you in November. So we're very fortunate to be in that position. Like I said, we've just started, and there will be more to, like those resolutions that I mentioned earlier in my opening, they're all going to be voted on soon and passed. You're going to hear about that so that we can make that statement and we can enforce the types of laws that are so necessary to stop these types of crimes. Greg, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. You know, the thing that I would suggest on a legislative level is I want to feel good about being an American again. I want to feel proud to be an American. And I think that comes not from legislation, but from the leaders' voices and the stories that they're telling at the highest levels. So that would be one thing that I would say. Second is I agree with the need for education to start to lower the heat on systemic racism, but I think it's a much bigger issue than that. And third, one of the things that really bothers me is that I think Trump unleashed and opened the door to a lot of anger and hatred in this country. But I also believe that some of that, or maybe a lot of it, is coming from a very disenfranchised part of our society, of our country, who have fallen behind educationally, who've fallen behind on the jobs curve, who've fallen behind on wealth, and they don't see a future in America. And so as a result, they're kind of taking it out on everybody else, because instead of being the major class, the white class that can kind of dictate, what the future looks like, now all of a sudden they're feeling that they're the underclass and they don't know where to go with that. And I think that's where some of this violence comes from. And I wish we could address that as a country.
You're right. And someone said that earlier and used that word of scapegoatism. It's exactly what it is. And I think what we realize, a lot of this didn't necessarily come from Donald Trump. Trump was the effect of what has been going on, is what we've been seeing as well. Don't get me wrong. He exacerbated it. We all know that, by the ease in which he spoke negatively about so many people, unfortunately, and so many groups, unfortunately. But that being said, I think you're spot on that there was a large amount of scapegoatism that was going on and still goes on at this point for a number of reasons. Linda?
Thank you. One of the things I'd like for you to look into is, like with Alice at UC Santa Cruz and such, is to connect with the younger generation as well of Asian Americans, and like Middlebury. I think some of them have faced some of this problem, and our tourists, according to the Monterey Herald today, the Asians are feeling some of that. I think we need to look at that, the younger generation and how they're affected by it and what they can do about it and how to do it and what their suggestions are. We've gone, as a generation, we're in the 50, 60, 70, 80 age group here. That's a different group that's facing the things, but the other generation is the younger generation that helps to bring that difference. And the AAPI is one of them. That there's a lot of young kids in that.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I bet you Professor Yang can probably speak to that based on her experience at UCSC.
Well, and one of the things that I'll add is that I think when we're looking at the educational programs that we're trying to develop, that it's both about looking at the history of scapegoating that victimizes people of color and women and people of different sexual orientations. But also, I think we want to emphasize the heroic side of people being allies and defenders, and the multiracial alliances that can, help white students feel like they're not just being attacked as racists, but that they also have the potential to show the courage that we've seen throughout history. To just give an example, I teach a course that looks at Asian American history, And in the section on the World War II incarceration of Japanese Americans, we talk about Ralph Lazo, who was a Mexican-American student who didn't want to be separated from his friends and ended up going to Manzanar, right? And ended up being this advocate. We also talk about Yuri Kochiyama and how she was a prominent spokesperson for African-American civil rights long before, you know, she was friends with Malcolm X, and she argued on behalf of African-American civil rights. You know, we have to look at these examples of people, you know, including a lot of the white lawyers who fought for Japanese Americans in the courts. You know, they provide inspiring examples regardless of your race or ethnicity or gender, right? And I think we want to emphasize that, because then we give our students an example of what they can do, how they can defend others, even if they're outside of their own ethnic or racial group.
It's a great point. Thank you. I appreciate that, that using other heroes, no matter where they're from or who they are, as examples. I think that's a good idea. Great idea. Thank you. I'll go with Richard Zhang one more time. And then if there's anybody else, I know we're about a little bit over 8 o'clock. And if there's anybody else that wants to speak, we can do that after Richard.
The concerns, we used to have the annual Chinese Cultural Festival at the Custom Plaza. And our board members are discussing whether they're going to, not this year, normally we in fall, but next year, are we going to have it? And how are we going to have it? Are we going to become the target of attack? Should we postpone until everything comes down? So that is the concern right now we're discussing. And I hope that the situations gets better so we can do it next year. Just to let you know. Thank you.
That's good. And I would hope the only reason that would prevent you from having such a festival would be the safety precautions of COVID, which hopefully are getting better thanks to the vaccines and everybody taking their vaccines. But know that we'd be proud to support you in any way we can in order for such a festival to take place. And I think many people feel the same way. Well, I want to thank everybody for being a part of this discussion. There's a lot more to talk about, and we could probably spend hours and hours on this, as we should, and we hope to do as we go forward. Obviously, in Washington, D.C., know that people are having these types of discussions and putting forward the types of legislation necessary in order to highlight, educate, and try to figure out what are some of these root causes going forward. And so I'm proud to be a part of that, but you've obviously provided me with plenty of evidence that I can use back in Washington, D.C. to make my point, to show that, you know, we come from a community here on the Central Coast that is obviously a community of immigrants that understands the value of immigrants, and will do everything we can to protect immigrants in this community, especially of Asian descent. And so I just want to say, obviously, thank you. And I look forward to turning these words into deeds, is what it comes down to, as was said earlier on this call. And it's true. That's what we have to look at now, is obviously the education and ensuring that we actually take action to stop and prevent further hate crimes against Asians and all people of color. So once again, thank you. And know that, please know that, and I hope most of you know this, that my office is there. If there's anything that we can do, any other comments that you'd like to share with me, please know that you can always get a hold of me. You know how to get a hold of me, and I'd be more than happy to have a further conversation going forward if you would like as well. So once again, thank you. Please stay safe, stay healthy, get your vaccines, and look forward to seeing you all in person very soon. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.